Right, good morning. Welcome to Wisdom's Wednesdays and the Difference Maker, as we always are, chatting about the Difference Maker on Wednesday. And the topic this morning, I think, is going to be an interesting one because it's a concept that we've sort of been benching about off air, and it's how do you do more with less? You know, is the Difference Maker a concept that can fit into this one idea of doing more with less? And I certainly think it is. We're looking to bring together this collective of people around the world, in every city, in every suburb, in every town, every country. We want difference makers who want to do more with less, who want to contribute to something that's larger than themselves, and are able to do that and buy into the idea of a collective that is actually collaborative and not in competition with each other. So working together to leverage the resources that are available to you within your area, within your environment, to make a difference. And that's really what the Difference Maker is all about. So we're going to head down that route, hopefully, but who knows? We can branch off in all sorts of different directions. But Trevor, you recently wrote a little article on LinkedIn about doing more with less. So maybe let's kick across to you to start off with.
Yeah, in fact, it was my latest One Idea article, and it was entitled Do More with Less, Buck the System. It was written about Bucky Fuller, or Buckminster Fuller. So you've got to go and have a look at this guy. I think he, during his time period, he died in 1984, but he was regarded as a crackpot in the US. And I knew nothing about him, and I took my family over to Disney World in the early 90s and was struck by this thing called Epcot Center in Orlando, Florida. Went through it and thought, no, man, who created this? And I started learning about this guy, Bucky Fuller, and that he had come up with these ideas of synergistic relationships between angles and structures and all that sort of thing. And I started thinking about how to apply this to relationships, and we tweaked his formula a little bit, and started doing networking between individuals all around the country based on a tweak of his formula, how to create synergistic relationships between individuals who had built fantastic businesses or had great ideas, and maybe they couldn't get that idea to where they wanted to go, but someone down the road had the right key. And what I thought about that time is that, you know what, I knew that all of us in business, because I headed up at that time one of the largest education franchises in the country. In fact, it was the largest private sector education country in the education operation in South Africa, called Academy of Learning. And I knew that we had a ton of spare capacity. And when I looked into everyone else in business, I could see they had a ton of spare capacity. Everyone is claiming that we're blooming busy, but everyone's a liar in business. We've all got tons of capacity. And the trick is to turn around and say, hey, how can we utilize some of our, just 10% of our capacity that we're not utilizing effectively, with 9 other people who've also got 10% of their capacity? How can we do more with less spending? Why go out there and recreate the wheel and build the foundation of structures when it's already been built by someone else, but it's not using them? Or not using them effectively. And I suppose that's the base of do more with less. And I mean, we have an individual here who understands the building of technical, I mean, he's a technical architect, I think, in Rob. So we were also talking about off air about working with other people's capacities and that sort of thing. I don't know if there's anything you want to pick up from my little introduction into where this concept of do more with less, working with a large number of people. Let me just add to that. How does it relate to difference makers, Ivan? Is because one of our first steps is to get at least one difference maker in every city in the world. And we can target 43,000 primary urban cities in the world that we can put one individual in. Now, 43,000 times all their spare capacities. And then we also recognize there are 4.3 million urban centers or towns that we actually get into. Imagine those collective spare capacities that can come together, where we can all do more collaboratively or collectively with less expenditure, just by building synergistic relationships, which comes from Bucky Fuller, into that equation. So I'm going to drop that into your lap, Rob. See if you can make anything out of that, or if that interests you as a direction. Do more with less through more people.
It's such a wide-ranging topic. I think I could talk about it for probably a couple of hours. But love the kind of debate concept. So having a strong IT background, I read a book and passed it around to my colleagues called The Lean Startup many years ago. And the Lean Startup doesn't just apply to IT, it applies to anybody starting a new business. And I think that maybe I coin a phrase out of that where perfection is not possible. And the real result of, or the acceptance of what you have built is not in your eyes, it's in the eye of the user. So the concept in the Lean Startup is there are two ways of actually developing something. The business idea, not an IT application, whatever. The one is to spend a year doing it and fine-tuning it and applying new technologies as they come along in this fast-paced world and stuff like that, increasing the cost for every extra hour, every month that you actually spend on development. And when you finally have something that you're very proud of, you launch it. And sadly, there isn't a wonderful take-up. And your friends that have now been used for your beta tests, you know, before you actually go and launch, they come back with a whole lot of questions, and lo and behold, you're back in development again. So the cost increases for every day, every hour that you're actually continuing with this. So the concept in the Lean Startup is just do enough. Get it out and to show people, whether it's for your colleagues or whether it's a segment of the market, get them to actually go out and use what you have developed for them, get some immediate feedback, and talking about a period of probably maximum 3 months to get something out, which isn't entirely possible, particularly if you're reusing assets that you already have and you're not starting everything from scratch. But yes, you get it out there in 3 months, and let the audience or the potential targeted market actually give you their feedback in terms of what they like, what they don't like. And then you have real input. And when they don't like, the other option that you have is to say to them, I can customize the things that you don't like for you in particular, and would you mind paying for that? So you can start to generate income far earlier in the cycle. And that's just one area of doing, perhaps, I don't know if it's more with less, but yeah, it certainly applies to the topic. But it's getting results, getting return, getting something earlier in the whole cycle. And you may have a failure on your hands, by the way, but you know you have a failure after 3 months, not after 1 year when you thought you had perfected the art of application development or whatever. More with less. Having read The Tipping Point, it's an argument for why Bill Gates and Steve Jobs did so well at the time, because they were very clever, because they both professed not to have a degree. So that was really a good, sorry, that's a bit tongue-in-cheek, don't need a degree to actually get ahead. But for example, they both had access to spare capacity. So in those days, most tertiary institutions had a computer, a mainframe, as in those days, a big computer that ran for most of the day, probably 12 hours a day. And then whatever they did after that only used a small percentage of the capacity of that mainframe. that computer. And those guys were able to use that spare capacity to do their own development and learning and experimenting and stuff like that for virtually no money, no cost. So there were winners all around. I don't know whether if Bill Gates was successful, he owed the university whose computer he used some bucks or whatever. I'm not sure that was what was, but the university was probably in a good place in saying, if we're advancing people's capability, is an extension of what we're trying to do as a university. So great, let's use it. It's costing us nothing for them to use that spare capacity. So would those guys have done if that spare capacity wasn't available for them to use for nothing? It's a moot point, isn't it? Maybe, but possibly not. I think I've had enough of my say, and I'm sure Ivan has a lot to offer as well. So I'm going to shut up for a moment. My wife will be very proud of that, by the way.
That's the inverse of spare capacity, is it? Yeah. Yeah, no, I think some excellent points. I actually want to bounce this back at Trevor, because I want him to pick up on three elements in the concepts that both you and he were mentioning, and that is spare capacity. It's also minimum viable product, which is effectively the concept of the lean startup. But then thirdly, cash flow positive, which I think is another very strong point that Trevor likes to pick up on. So how do you bring those together in a project, Trevor? Because I think that's key to what we're talking about across the board here.
I believe it is number one by highlighting it, because we all think that people understand these concepts, but the three of those together, people don't tend to think about. And why do I say that? Because you see so many entrepreneurs around the world who are throwing their home, they are bonding their houses, they are throwing it into the development of the foundation program or application, let's talk today's technology, behind their latest idea, and they throw millions into it, and the vast majority of these don't work. So those three together, especially cash flow positive from day one on your idea. If that cash, if it is not coming in and rolling in, there's something wrong with your idea. So if you're going to persist with it, then okay, you're going to persist because most people give up because they don't persist on their idea. But don't throw your house and home behind it. Don't throw your family's future behind that, as many people actually do. That's very important to me, always has been. And then I think the idea of spare capacity, part of the off, before we came on board, we were talking about competition versus collaboration in the world. And I think we are now, and Robbie's very big into this, I was just listening to him, collaboration is absolutely critical in today's society, just because collaboration allows you to actually develop relationships with other people who have already invested money. Instead of them having to come up with this new idea, you may have the idea, they may have the production capacity behind that idea. And if you share 50-50 on that, you can share 50-50 in $1 billion enterprise, as opposed to 100% of nothing. Now, I mean, every entrepreneur knows that saying, you can have 10% of something or 100% of nothing. So every entrepreneur has been into a negotiation where that statement has been bandied around by some smart attorney somewhere, trying to knock you down on the percentage that you want to hold. But it has meaning. You can either throw your family and the future and everything behind an idea that you want to control 100%, but you've got 100% of the downside risk. And the vast majority of people who come up with new ideas, they never ever see any money coming in. In fact, they lose what they've got. The vast majority. It's a fact. Go and have a look at what's that guy who wrote the e-business. I'm trying to remember his name.
Michael Gerber.
That's him. Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you. He did his psychological research some 20, 30 years ago. But we've seen these guys all the time. I'm not going to belabor the point. Just collaborate. Have a look for other people who enjoy doing business, who enjoy making money, who enjoy cash flow positive, who don't like throwing money away, who don't want to put their family's futures at risk, but they want to grow enterprises. Collaborate with those people.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, I think that's the essence of it, and it's one of the challenges I think of lots of people who venture out into business for themselves for the first time. They think they need to hold on to everything. They need to keep it close to their chest, yeah. One of the other little concepts you mentioned earlier was, if you think it's already been thunked, they are essentially no new ideas. They might be tweaks on old ideas, but they are essentially you have a bright idea, go and Google it and see how many things come up on Google that people have had exactly the same idea or very similar ideas. So, to hold on to that IP, as Trevor says, it just could wind up costing you everything. And, at the end of the day, if you put your idea out there and somebody picks it up and runs with it, well, that's just the fact they're going to do it better than you. But the chances are, if it's your idea and you're really passionate about it, you're going to be the one who's going to do it the best, providing you can get the right kind of people around you. And I think that's the real key about what, that we're trying to sort of focus on here is, can you get the right kind of people around you? That's what we're looking to do. We're trying to get the right kind of people around us, people with a similar mindset, with a commonality of thought and purpose at a level. It doesn't have to be everybody's 100% the same. That's pointless. We don't want everybody to be 100% the same. We want the differences. We want the people who have different skills, different ideas, different thought processes, different angles on the way to do things, and out of that comes innovation. To be open to an environment. And I mean, can you imagine, as Trevor said earlier, 43,000 people in just in major cities around the world, being prepared to toss in whatever their spare capacity is, from an intellectual point of view, from an operational point of view, and everybody's got spare capacity at a different level, and in a different way. I mean, they may be the billionaires of the world who have spare capacity of cash. That's great. And if that's what they're prepared to contribute, fantastic. But guess what? There's a billion people who have got spare capacity in a totally different format, which actually can go to create that foundation of a massive enterprise. And if every one of a billion people can put in 1%, of their spare capacity, you suddenly have a massive resource at your as an opportunity to leverage and to use. So I think that's really the concept of what we're trying to do with the Difference Maker here is bring as many people together as possible who can contribute something. It could just be an idea. It could be a question. Rob spoke about asking, allowing people to ask questions. People should ask questions all the time. I mean, from my perspective, that's the way I've learned just about everything about business. In the 40 odd years that I've been in business, never been afraid to ask a question. Started off knowing absolutely nothing about business, nothing about accounting, nothing about systems, nothing about manufacturing, nothing about operations. And I would go into businesses and I would sit down with the managers, the directors, the owners of the businesses, and they would mention a concept, and I would say, well, please explain to me what you mean by that, and then listen to the answers. And I think that's the way I've learned, and that's the way we'd like to engage us. Ask the questions. Somebody will have an answer somewhere. And the more people we get in the system and on the platform, the easier those answers are going to come out. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts on that one.
I'm so pleased you brought up the point that even some people have money as their spare capacity, because before you were saying that, I was just thinking that there are 1 to 3% of the people in the world who actually have cash reserves. They have money to burn. But it's interesting that those people actually don't burn their money. They are very savvy with where they actually put their money. That's why that money keeps on growing. But they do have cash as their spare capacity. And all I want to say, if there are any of you 1 to 3% that have got those tons of money and you just want to throw it at various ventures out there, throw it in our direction. There are 3 people around here that will help dwindle your money down to where it's going to dwindle if you're just going to throw it away. We will do that very well for you, Rob, I'm sure. We'll take a couple of billion in from those folk. But people are not like that. When you utilize your spare capacity, you use it with those the philosophy of being cash flow positive from day one as best as possible, because then you know that you're actually investing your money into something that's going to grow and you're not going to throw it away. So I love all the different things that have been talked about. Rob's smiling because he's going to throw some money at us from his 1 to 3% base of having all the cash in the world. Oh, sorry, Rob, I wasn't supposed to mention that. Yes, go.
No, I think it's been a fascinating topic today, and obviously just scratching the surface of a lot of things. I think we've often talked about the collective value of what we bring. And we've all, I think, been successful in business, and we all failed in business. So why not learn the lessons or apply the lessons, or at least think about the lessons that we have to help you with? Why did you get it wrong? What would you do differently today? I mean, one question that we've asked people a lot of, what is it that you would have liked to have known earlier in your life? What would have helped you be more successful? Now you know whatever, would that have been very useful earlier in your life? And to try and get those lessons or those ideas or those values actually imprinted on people earlier in their lives, going into the very competitive world that we live in, will help them survive, help them make less mistakes, help them assess the risks of the things that they're doing and mitigate those risks in some shape or form. So there's a lot that can be done or gained from the knowledge that the people have. And I would like to say the wisdom that people have, because knowledge is the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, and wisdom is the complete picture, being able to put those pieces of knowledge together to create a picture for you. Thanks.
I like that analogy. I really do. Yeah, it's a good one.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I think as Rob said, I think a topic that is close to all of our hearts. It's fascinating, and you can spend hours drilling into it. And we would love to spend hours with anybody who wants to be part of this and be part of the WISDOMS DifferenceMaker program. Difference Maker in every city around the world. Look at the show notes, subscribe to the channel, and share it around, and join us on Patreon. Join us on these sessions once you've connected with us on Patreon. And we look forward to hosting another session next week, Wednesday. So go well and go and make a difference. Cheers, everyone.
What the world needs now.
I am a difference maker.
Imagine all the people.
I am a difference maker.